Welcome to another Scientolopedia podcast. I got the chance to talk to my old friend Mark Shreffler, who is famous in the Scientology world for his tone scale seminars, and he's just a wonderful, fun guy to talk to. So enjoy this conversation. There's actually part one and part two. After about an hour, we got cut off. He was in South Africa, and I'm in the U.S., and whatever, technical difficulties. But we picked it up again in part two, so watch them both. And this is brought to you by Scientolopedia. Please become a patron for any amount, $1, $5, whatever you're comfortable with per month. Support us in doing our dissemination work on your behalf. And here we go. Okay, you got to turn on your microphone. If you hear me, there's a little, there it is. So you hear me?
I hear you. Can you hear me?
Now I do, yes. And I see you too.
David, good to see you, man.
Glory, hallelujah. I bet you just went through hell trying to get the thing to work.
What's that?
Did you just go through hell trying to get the thing to come on?
Well, I hated the fact that you were having to wait for this thing because I'm like computer. Anyway,
Well,
good to see you.
I was just trying to download and install WhatsApp because he suggested that one. But hey, we're rolling.
We are happening, brother. This is really cool. And you know, it's the first time out, so you're going to expect a little disorder to blow off.
Yeah. Now your camera is a little bit high. If you see yourself, you got to just point your computer monitor down a little bit. There you go. Now we see the whole beautiful you.
But I have an excellent background here, but I got to get those inserts, and like you have a beautiful photograph back there. That's a great thing.
Yeah, you see, we're actually in a soundproof booth, so we won't interrupt LRH's auditing right now.
That's good.
Well, anyway, it's great to see you, man. It's I was trying to think when the last time I saw you, and the last time I remember was chatting a bit in Celebrity Center Rose Garden long time ago.
That was more than a week ago. So you know you're on your own, pal.
Yeah. Well,
that would be a good place to meet for sure. It's a beautiful thing back there.
Yeah. Well, it was either that or on a golf course. And it's one of my questions I was going to ask if you're playing any golf these days.
You know, I have my golf bag stacked in the other room. I was looking at it this morning and thought it would be a nice prop, but I haven't played since Adam was a boy. It's been some over a year easily.
Yeah. Well, I know I don't play as much as I used to, but I'm in a league at a local course. It's all seniors. It's a bunch of old farts. And I usually joke that, you know, it's these guys, you know, you hear the same story over and over again. They can't remember your name. And they're talking about all their aches and pains and, you know, their hip replacements and all that sort of stuff. But we have fun. I get out once a week and
there's a group I can keep up with.
Yeah. So anyway, you're in South Africa.
That's right, just north of Joburg, between Johannesburg and Pretoria. We're on a little farm right in the middle of that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You got moo cows and all that sort of thing going on?
Lot of what?
You got moo cows and all that sort of thing going on?
No cows. It's just it's not a working farm. It's just a big plot with a nice house on it and our cottage, and it's just a perfect situation because we're between all kinds of interesting things going on. We have a huge horse community right over here. It's the largest per capita horse location on the planet. I mean, that's a horsing community really close by, but we can get to everything. It's
Well,
very comfortable here. And of course, we're coming out of our summer now. And so it's going into a nice fall.
uh-huh. And you've been there quite a while, right? Like 8 or 10 years, maybe something like that.
Been coming here since 94.
Oh,
My first tour out here was, it was just a wild and woolly show with the OT committee down here, which is the best one on the planet, I swear.
I've heard good things about that group down there.
Yeah, it's a great bunch of people. Of course, I've known all these guys for all these years, and I've been coming back. And then there was a 10-year period when I would come down twice a year for a month and a shot, doing tours to all the major locations where we had a facility called Guarantee Trust. The government paid us to prepare a bunch of college graduates. They were already college graduates in accounting. And the problem was we don't have nearly enough accountants in the South African business world.
Huh.
Well, we had thousands of them out there that couldn't get jobs. So the government said to my friends, solve this problem. We need thousands of accountants as soon as possible. So over the next 10 years, we put 10,000 of these kids into jobs. And it was a 6-month program and the internship. And they were, I mean, these are kids who are graduates or college graduates in accounting. And they couldn't get a job. Now, mind you, this was the apartheid was over by this time, but it was still very much in the minds of people.
Uh-huh.
Still floating there as kind of a fixed idea. So my job at the end of this 6-month training program was to come in and deliver them a day-long workshop that just snapped them out of it and got them into, this is the way you go out and go through a job interview. And it was absolutely the most productive period of my life. We were having so much fun. And so many of these kids were getting completely ripped out of their heads. And it was the most successful government program going at the time. And it was a lot of fun. Anyway, that was then, but I just fell in love with the place. I fell in love with the people and the culture and the whole thing. And so it was inevitable that we'd end up back here.
Cool.
And you're in Nashville.
Nashville, Tennessee.
Man. You gotta love those ribs, baby.
I call it the land of no eyes.
No eyes?
Yeah, in the South, because, it's not how high you can jump, it's how high you can jump.
So you didn't go up there.
Huh?
You didn't grow up there in Nashville.
No, I've been here since 2005. I was kind of done with LA anyways, and my daughter was here living with her mother, and she needed my support, let's put it that way. So sounded like a good idea, and I've been here since 2005. It was a nice area when I came here, but because they talk about they have a traffic report, and I say, traffic? You don't have traffic here, coming from LA. Yeah. But now everybody's migrating from California, New York, all the communist socialist states. They're getting the hell out and coming to Tennessee.
And the music people moved to Austin.
Well, of course, Nashville it's called Music City.
Yeah.
So Austin, Nashville, real hot spots for music. And yeah, there's the great artists, you can go downtown to the clubs and you'll hear the best players you've ever heard, so.
Fantastic. Gotta be great.
So yeah, there's fun stuff, and it's, it is a nice area. So yeah, I'm pretty happy here.
Good. Excellent. Now, what kind of group activity is going down there? How are you staying connected in that way?
Well, it's all virtual for me because I do the Scientolopedia website. And by the way, I should throw in a commercial here. We're going to have links to Scientolopedia, to your book, which we're going to get to in a minute. Sacrificial Branches, we'll link to that. But I have a big social presence on Facebook, 800 plus people in the Facebook group. There's several pages, like I created a page for Yvonne Gillum Gents, for example. She's on
Right.
Facebook, things like that. And then, so it's supporting other auditors and getting pieces to them and students. And but the commercial part is that I need donos. I need people to click on the patron or Patreon button below and sign up as a patron. $1, $5, whatever a month. And that helps a lot because we spend money for web hosting, and I just, computer equipment and all kinds of things that it costs to keep the DSEM activities going. So that's the commercial.
Excellent. Excellent. So it's obviously a working thing. And I know you took a break there for a while. It's great to have you back.
Yeah, well, between I would say 2002 or 4, I had, was under the radar. I had, seen the writing on the wall as far as the church goes. And it was in 2010 when I actually got myself declared and became officially a persona non grata as far as the church goes. Right. And then I created Scientolopedia in 2011. So, it's been doing my own auditing. I've had a lot of case advancements since then. So a lot of good things Scientology wise.
Excellent. That's great, David. Great. So 2010, you went out. I think I spent 2009 myself going through that whole log jam.
It was really 9, but I think it was 10 before I came out in public and I created another website, and that's what got me declared. But I was under the radar, and then 2009, I realized, oh my God, this guy's a raving lunatic is running Scientology. One of those kind of moments. I knew things were bad. I knew it was a schizophrenic organization, but I didn't know how crazy it was at the top. So.
Yeah, boy, very, very similar with me, as a matter of fact. I was outside and touring all over the planet, but I didn't have anything to do with the internal machinations. And then I was back, I would return from one of these tours back into Clearwater and walk down the hallways, and they're lined with photographs of these huge donors to the International Association of Scientologists. There isn't a single Class 8 on these walls. Yeah. There are no auditors. They're the backbone of Scientology is completely missing. And I realized this place doesn't represent Scientology anymore. It's this international association business. And I started to pull the string on that and realized how completely naive I had been about what was going on. Because there have been other things we've been fighting. The OCA, for example, that thing had been completely decimated back in the early 80s. And anyway,
well, I have a note to touch on that because I know that's a subject you're really interested in. But now I noticed there was a lovely lady passed by a few minutes ago. So are you married? Are you just have a great relationship there, or what's going on with that?
We've been partners for 8-9 years now. We met. I went over when I got out of the church. I had no idea there was anything going on outside the church. And so I thought, geez, I'm going to have to do all this myself. I got to find some kind of a group to connect with here. And I discovered this thing called Ron's work. I went in and I called him up, and I got Max Howery on the phone, introduced myself and said, I don't know anything about you guys, but from what I can see, you're doing a wonderful job. So, and he had heard of me from some connection or another. They were about to do a convention in Greenwich. And he said, geez, it'd be wonderful if you come out and join us. And I said, well, hell, I'll do that. I'll come up. It was like the following week. So I jumped on a plane and went to this convention. There's 250 people at this thing.
Yeah.
And, I've done how many thousands of events over the years, but I never started an event that was this high on the tone scale. I mean, at the beginning, they were, wow, this is the way it usually ends, in my game. But this was just such a fantastic group, very alive. And at that time, I asked them, what you want me to discuss some dissemination things? Yeah, they really need some Division 6 stuff. So I said, what about the OCA? I said, no, nobody's interested in the OCA. And I understood this because in the early 80s, it was wiped out. It was completely changed. And now they put it into the computer. They stopped training people in correct evaluation. And it was guaranteed to invalidate the heck out of the person sitting in front of you. If you told him what his profile said, I guarantee you it's a wrong indication. And I didn't realize the level of malevolence of that particular thing, because I hadn't realized this had happened, because I was in the mission network coming up and we always used the Salmon OCA. Well, actually, it was the American standard and then became the OCA, and Ray Kemp did his modifications for LRH with it. And that was the one we used all these years. Didn't find out until much later that it had been changed in the church because we didn't use that version. And we were having fantastic results with it. So anyway, long story short, the OCA, anybody who's had an OCA evaluation in the church from about 1983 forward has had wrong indications piled on them.
Wow.
And especially in New Public. Wiped them out. Now, you get somebody like Dave Worthen. You know Dave?
No.
Dave Worthen was the registrar for the Orange County org. Very bright guy. He's been out for some years. He was a fantastic profile evaluator. You find very few of them, but he was doing it with Ray Kemp's version and the whole thing. So I know he's in the States and he's still doing it. I just saw him on LinkedIn or something like that. Excellent guy, really knows the test. But of course, the world champion of evaluation is Martin Runow, who is still connected with the church. He's got the Performia operation all around the planet.
Oh,
That guy can tell you. I guess it is connected in some way with WISE. He just wanted to get the use of the profile out in the business community, and he did. And he is an evaluator who can tell you the color of your grandmother's hat by looking at your profile. I mean, it's like, yee! I mean, he's just an awesome evaluator. And I studied with him for ages. We were trying to get the OCA changed back to its original format in the church, and he got considerable heat for that.
Yeah.
Anyway. See,
I don't think anybody in the field, the auditors that I know of, are using the OCA, as their on an intro line. I've seen it in use over the years with the church. But in the field, I don't see them using it. And that would be something that, it'd be good to get really sorted out, like a number of things, the tech and, that's fascinating.
Here's the thing, David, and this is important to understand about this profile. There were two major things in the church that completely killed its dissemination. One was the alteration and misuse of the OCA. That's a genius tool that LRH had created by Julia Salmon back in Phoenix. It's just an incredible instrument. We had 100% people sign up with VGIs to find out what it was, because the profile shows you right there what the guy's ruin is. And in the dissemination drill, you go through these procedures of awareness characteristics. One of them is awareness of ruin. Now, ruin, another word for ruin is why. This is the guy's why. And when you can hand him the guy's why, like Ron says, when you find a correct why, it opens up the door for a handling. Also, everybody gets very enthusiastic about it. So when you tell the guy, well, this is a profile, blah, 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 you sort of enlighten him about it, and then you say, and this is your area of greatest concern. And when you would describe it to them, they would invariably go, holy smokes, that's been a problem for me for years. I can do something about that. And the rest, as they say, is history. It's a fantastic profile. It's never been used correctly, except by Martin Runow. He uses the Kemp version with his whole Performian network. That's the correct version. My version is the Kemp version. I don't know about Dave Worthen, which version he uses, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was using the Kemp. But the Kemp is a very accurate profile. And here's the interesting thing about it. What it reflects, because Ron asked this woman, Julia Salmon, who is a psychologist, professional training, but she specialized in making profiles. And she was very highly trained Scientologically. So Ron turned to her and said, I need a profile that shows me the person's axiom 28, lays it out. I want to see how well the person contact handles salvages, brings understanding, and then the cause, distance, effect with intention, attention, et cetera, These points of axiom 28 are laid out by the OCA. So you can not only see what the guy's doing and what his problem area is, but you know precisely what to do about it. You can walk him right up the line using profiles alone until it was altered in '83 by the people who were running David Miscavige at the time.
Well, I know who we call when the church is in the process of getting reformed and they want to figure out the Div 6 lines. I think we bring you in as a consultant on that. Because
well, there are some good ones around. Dave Worthen, I mentioned, Marty Runow, but I don't know honestly how these people remain in the church. I'm very worried, actually.
That's a big mystery, isn't it? I mean, how are they still there? And it doesn't really speak well of their ability to discern things or evaluate things, but whatever.
Well, there's just also the sheer PTS factors, suppression factors and stuff.
Yeah.
But in any case, I designed a workshop, but I think I sent you a copy of it. That it comes in the 4 parts.
Maybe back some time ago, but not recently. So
okay,
I'll have to. We'll get caught up on a few things because I have something I want to send you too. But you mentioned Max.
We have many things to discuss.
Oh yeah. So, but you mentioned Max. I just want to say I love Max. I've interviewed him, and the fact that we don't want to go too much into it, but he delivers the Excalibur, the Bill Robertson on the upper bridge, and right. To me, I think the guys down there that you're talking about do as well. So that is what gives me a lot of hope, is that on the upper end of the bridge, people are just busting loose in these, they're small pockets, relatively small, even though Max has, several hundred people on lines and a good churning organization. It's still a drop in the bucket compared to 7 billion that we have to confront dealing with. But so you also were, you mentioned to me in an email that, you have a lot of concern about the way TRs are taught, which for people that don't know, these are drills or training regimens on how to communicate better and confront life better. So just if you want to say something about that, or what happened to TRs and what you feel is like really needed for practitioners to get their wits around as far as getting people to sit down and confront each other and communicate better.
Yes, well, as you know, Zellerage was telling us repeatedly, all problems are problems of communication. This is the fundamental of fundamentals in Scientology. It's usually the first course people do when they walk in the door. And like he says, if you haven't mastered your TRs early in Scientology training, supervisors at higher levels will not be teaching their subjects, but the TRs. You've got to understand these drills. And it was the area of the tech that he revisited more often than anything else. They came out originally in the 50s, in the early 50s. He revisited them again in the late 50s, 3 times in the 60s. And in the 70s, he went in early on and he was going, what's going on here? And then in 1979, he said, he sent out a request. I want to see the audio tapes of the flag interns. There were 12 of us. I was one of them, actually. And he wanted to hear an audio tape of our sessions. And we were all quite excited. So we sent our tapes. And 2 days later, we got the word back that said, all crew auditing is to cease immediately until further notice. And of course, the flag interns are the only ones auditing the crew. So we're now looking at each other going, what did you do to your PC? Of course, I was the least trained on the flag internship. I was a net auditor. I just finished the course and now I'm doing the internship. But there were class 8s and briefing course and grad 5s, the rest of the guys and gals. And so they all looked at me and went, what the hell, man? It's like I was practically a newbie. I came in 75. But I said, look, my guys are flying. My PCs are all VGIs and da-da-da-da-da. I don't know, you know. But anyway, the next day, we all got a comm from Ron that said, report to the ITO, the International Training Org, immediately and get your OT and TR0 flat for 2 hours. That was the entire communication. So that internship became what became known as the TRs and metering pilot, 1979.
Okay.
And that was the turning point of my life. Absolutely, no question about it. It was the most astonishing 9 months of this lifetime. And in fact, of many lifetimes, because this dealt with the living lightning of living. And, you know, it took us 4 months, mind you. He called for the lead auditors and CSs from every org on the planet. So we went from 12 interns to 200 students from all over the planet. And this was the last time he revisited any area of the tech. And he knew if we don't master this, we're in rough shape. You got to get your TRs in. So,
well, it's a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I was a course soup. When I first came in, they were doing, we were doing, that's when, you know, the 2 hours no blink came out, and I actually did that, passed it, bull baited as well. But, and later the Pro TRs course and various, I'm a big fan of TRs. Yeah. I joke sometimes, I say what the world needs, people that are upset about or worried, you know, they're in fear. They're getting bombarded with all the media, how, you know, dangerous everything is. They need to be sat down across from, you know, fill a football stadium of people and have them sit down across from each other and, you know, do some TRs that'll arm them, you know, give them some armament against the onslaught of all the crazy that's going on these days.
Yeah, there's no doubt. That would be the way, that's the way into the planet in my estimation. Mm-hmm. But we had there on the pilot, a room full of class 8s and briefing course guys. And now they're all sitting around there doing their long confronts. And you could always hear this kind of bitterment going around the course. Geez, I've been doing TRs for hundreds and hundreds of hours. I know how to do the TRs. And this barrier to learning was totally in, which is you think you already know what they are when you haven't got a clue. And I sent Ron a letter one time. It was a big win that I was reporting to him, several pages, and wrapped it up with, what do you think, Ron? Love, Shreff. And I sent it off to him, and a couple of days later, his reply came back in the form of a cramming order. Took me about 14 days to do this one. Jesus. And the last part of this, which was, I'm just winding around going, okay, did I give a win wrong or what was this thing about? And he left it for me to sort out, which I did with this cram. And the last reference on this cramming order was the What is Scientology tape. 1957 made it. It was a lecture he delivered in South Africa. And in there, he makes the observation. Oh, you make so many in this lecture. It's an unbelievable. I had the M9 this lecture. I say I had to. I had the opportunity to do it, which I loved. But there was a section about 250 feet into this tape where he said, those things I tell you are not true because I tell you they are true. And if anything I tell you or have ever told you is shown to differ from the individual observation, be it a good observation, then it isn't true. It doesn't matter whether I said it was true or not. Do you understand? He was out at the audience in this tape, and it hit me in my head. What do you think, Ron, was the wrong question? It doesn't matter what Ron thinks. What do you see? And this led to a survey of this entire course room, the entire pilot. And we discovered that the primary reason everybody was there was to get an LRH pass on his TRs. That was a survey number one reason. I'm here because Ron's at the other end of this thing.
Why don't you say the name of that tape again? I'm sure people, would like to.
Scientology and Effective Knowledge. It's a
Okay.
1957 tape, and you've got to get it off of the Ron's org site because later versions were altered to take out a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, we have just another plug for Scientolopedia. We have all the lectures for free download via torrent files. It's a special way to download files, but
Fantastic.
they're early versions. Yeah, we have I don't know, it's like over 100 gigabytes of materials, all the written materials, courses, books, OEC, tech vols, plus all the lectures, the non-confidential materials.
It's so awesome, David. That is an awesome piece of work right there.
Yeah, we've probably over the last 8 or 9 years since we've had that up. I don't know. I mean, you can't really get an accurate stat, but it's in the terabytes of downloads that have come through Scientolopedia.
Fantastic. That's so well done. Jesus. But that was the tape that not only turned me around, it was that day that I became a Scientologist. When I realized I am not here to get LRH's pass. I am here to have a perfect comm cycle. I am trying to learn a perfect comm cycle. And until I have a perfect comm cycle, according to what I see, and this is where the thing came in that became the realization of my life, David, and you appreciating TRs will understand this. Most people, when they go into a communications course, are waiting for their supervisor to pass them. And when the supervisor says, okay, that's a pass, you go, oh, thank God.
Right.
It's the wrong flow. It's out integrity. If it's not true for you, it's not true. But how do you get a pass on your TRs if you don't see them for yourself? And how do you see them for yourself without self-coaching? As LRH said in the coaching HCOB, you very definitely flunk the student for self-coaching, because you cannot be watching your own TRs and have any possibility that your TRs are in. It can't happen. Can't happen. Your exclusive interest is over there. And so how did we do it on the pilot? We tripped right into it because LRH was remote. He wasn't there in the pilot with us. He was at a remote location. He had many things going on.
All right.
So when we got to the point where our twin, you're great. My twin was Craig was his name, but I couldn't see anything else to correct. So we thought, let's send up a video to Ron. So we did a TR4 video and sent it up to LRH, and then LRH would see it and he would write his observations and a cramming order, and it would come back down. And then we would watch the videotape. And we would read his correction and watch the videotape and see where it was. And that was the thing. You're not self-coaching anymore. if you're watching you doing TRs over there, you're not looking at yourself while you're doing the TRs.
Right.
This is what allowed us to pass finally by the numbers, because we had a chance to see, do I want to turn this in? Is this, according to me, a pass?
Yeah.
And we would send those
Well,
up and those would be corrected.
well, he wasn't joking when he said the world begins with TR0. That's
True.
a very profound and simple statement. But, you know, even at my advanced level and so forth, I have to remind myself, oh, yeah, this present time. Present time is a beautiful thing.
It's true, man.
Now,
But that was that. Yes. The
when you
TR.
now, obviously, this was before you started doing the tone scale seminars, but do you feel like that sort of bled into or led into your creating that whole, because you're famous, you know, in a lot of quarters of this globe for, and by the way, we have that, your seminar on Scientolopedia on the homepage. If people go there, it's called, there's an icon and it says free seminar. And that's a link to your video on doing the tone scale seminar.
Oh,
And
fantastic. I'm very happy to hear that.
that's been up there for a number of years. And I don't have a stat on how many, but I'm sure it's in the thousands of people, because we have several thousand people that come through the site, new first time users a month. So that's not Kardashian. I usually joke, it's not Kardashian type viral stats, but you know, it's pretty darn good for what else is going on in the field. For a decimated bunch of, for a decimated bunch of beat up Thetans that got, you know, pulverized by the church, it's pretty good that, you know, there's that much activity still.
Yeah, absolutely true. But to your question, David, when I finally passed, I finally had the passing video, and it's like, the fact is, I got to tell you a funny little story.
Okay.
No, I've let in. I can't.
You got to now.
I cut a video, and this is right at the end. I mean, I've been on this 9 months. I was the ninth one to finish the pilot, and this was the tape before my passing video. But I finished the session with my twin, and I thought, that's fantastic. Yeah, this is great. You know, God, mind you, we were using e-meters. I mean, you coach with reality, and I'm doing TR4 with my coach, and he's holding on to the cans, and that meter is live, and we're getting tone arm on a 90-second Do Birds Fly. You know, the comm cycle is working. You know, the needle is clean and so forth and so on. Anyway, not to get into too much stuff. I was very happy with this video and walked out. I had a tiniest little, but you know, that was fantastic. That's fantastic. I'm very confident about this. And then I got the instruction back from that video. And we watched the video. I thought, okay, look at it. Look at the meter actions. Look at the whole thing. Oh, look at that session. Look at that. You got my coach. You've got your TRs in when your coach goes into session, and he doesn't have any choice about it. He's just in session. He's in communication with you, and you with him, and it's a really beautiful thing to watch. And so I was in there. Watch that video, they set it up, and the cram came back from LRH. This man has an overt. Pull it.
You mean the PC? Your coach?
Me.
Oh, you.
Yeah, his corrections are always of the student who's sending the video up.
Okay.
And so he's checking out my TR4 video. And he said, this student has an overt. Pull it. Now, a little background, about a month and a half before that, we were sent an OW write-up from Ron, 35 categories on each of 8 dynamics.
Wow.
Yeah. But guess what we're doing for about a month and a half? 200 students, and they're just writing our buns off. And I was one of the 7 meter checkers. So when somebody would finish his OW write-up, I was one of the guys they would bring it to, and then I would read the OWs, and okay, then I would give him the meter check.
Yeah.
And if he passed, fantastic, you get the forgiveness and so forth. And if he didn't, he's going back and writing some more. But of course, in the process of reading their OWs, oh yes, I did a little something like that myself. So I was amending my own OW write-up. So not only was mine thorough, it was thorough to the power of 20 or whatever. So to get this instruct from Ron, this man has an overt after I passed my meter check. The missionaire and I looked at each other and he said, well, LRH sees it. Go out and see what you got, Shreff. So I went out and I just scoured around about this. And you know what? I'm damned if I didn't come up with something. And I knew it had to be between the OW write-up and that day, because everything else was written up. And in fact, it had happened. I had a friend, Ray Facto, who was on the RPF at the time. He was doing amends and so forth. He was washing dishes in the kitchen. And every night on my way back to the room, I would stop by and say, hey. And this night, I was in the kitchen with him. And the pilot at that time was eating rice and beans. That was our diet. Because we weren't getting any graduates out of this dang pilot. So we're now eating rice and beans. They're fantastic rice and beans, but it's rice and beans. And
well, carb overload there.
Oh, baby. I really got to like rice and beans, actually. But anyway, I'm sitting there having this conversation with Ray, and I noticed the head steward is in the other end of the kitchen. And I thought, that's interesting. So I said, hey, Ray, guess what? They took us off of rice and beans today. And he said, no shit. He said, yep, we're off of rice and beans. So tomorrow I get a meal, man. I finally get to eat again. We've been rice and beans for several months. And he said, well, very well done, man. And I said, okay, man, I'll see you tomorrow. I turned on my heel and I was out of there.
You were lying. Right?
The next day at lunch, I'm going in there. We had to eat in 2 sittings. There's 200. So they had a buffet set up and we would file in. I was on the first sitting and I was halfway back in the line, and Nick Fraser from New Zealand was walking up and down this table of food. And I said, what's holding things up there, Nick? And he said, hey, mate, there's no rice and beans up here. And I said, what the hell? And I walked up the length of the line and I'm walking up and down the table. And I just about headed back to the kitchen, but I ran into my own overt. And I turned to Nick and said, Nick, go back into the kitchen and find out why we haven't got any rice and beans. And he said, right, mate. And he turned on his heel and off into the kitchen. And he came back and said, they thought we were off of rice and beans. They didn't fix any. So I turned to the line and said, okay, friends, we got a half an hour. Let's eat. So we had a fantastic lunch. And boy, I mean, I just loved that. I just ate it right up. It was a kind of a fun little game. It was.
Well, I've heard stories over the years of LRH CSing folders and his perception from a distance. And, that rings true that he could spot just the minutest, the most simple of things from a distance with very minimal data. I mean, his ability to evaluate data was off the charts.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we have time to also talk about, well, you mentioned the destruction of the FSM program a little bit, but, I know your heart is very near and dear to FSMing. I was a power FSM for about a dozen years. So we have a Div 6 in our DNA. And, but when you say the destruction of the FSM program, I didn't know that it was destroyed? What did you mean by that?
I was wiped out. Very slick guy at Flag. I don't remember his name. He was a Sea Org member, walked around, carried himself, very distinguished gentleman. I couldn't figure out what the problem was. Something was wrong with this FSM program, because as I was on my tours, I was discovering that people in the field were selecting other Scientologists in the field for services. For example, the so-called Flag FSM. What is that? There's no policy ever that mentions a Flag FSM. But the FSM series is very clear on this point. If you're my friend, David, and I send you in for your first service, and you go in and you do that service, I'm your FSM. I put in a slip. I'm your FSM. And if you finish that service and re-sign for another service, I get the FSM commission for that automatically. It was continuous re-sign. But if you ever leave the organization and don't re-sign, you need to be reselected.
Right.
I am the only one who can reselect you. I am your FSM. You can only have one FSM. It's right there in the policy, because he says, if, however, the student leaves the organization without re-signing, he must be reselected with a fresh selection slip before another commission can be paid the FSM. If the FSM does not select, org can select him, for which no commission is paid to the FSM. That commission is shared by the staff. That becomes the staff pay. Now, that's the way I understood it. That's the way we understood in San Francisco. I was the public registrar. I made $2,500 a week pay. That was my paycheck. But our paychecks came from the FSM commission received by the staff from all the people we were sending up the line. That's what the FSM series says. And the truth of the matter is, nobody will agree with that. No, you can be anybody. No, this is all verbal tech. Sit down, find your words, look it up. It's right there. It's as obvious as tits on a bullfrog. I mean, it's right out there. But now they created a whole FSM program. They created FSM programs for training. They created FSMs for specific orgs, but they're all going in there and selecting people who are already on the bridge. These are, they're posts in the org that are there to recover people, the ARC break program and so forth. And 10% of is the FSM commission for auditing and 15% for training. And if I am a staff member and I get somebody, if I'm the ARC break and I recover somebody to the bridge, then an FSM commission is cut for 15% of that guy's payment. And that thing goes into the staff salary sum. And the whole staff shares on that. That's what pays the staff. You might notice that over all those years, church staff members, you just paid terribly. They just made nothing.
Well, I see a different reason for that. When the upper orgs, like flag and management, and I'll call it stealing, but they grab over 50% of the revenue the org makes, then leave the rest for the org to buy its toilet paper and pay its rent. That's a problem. But
it's definitely true. But the FSM commission never goes to anything else, because that's the staff's money. But it's in the FSM series, because right now it sounds like for somebody who's been a flag FSM for many years and made a hell of a lot of money off the deal, how is it that I can approach a guy in the field and select him to flag for the L's, and I can make $1,000, $2,000 for FSM commission off of that selection? I just met the guy, but he's ready to go to flag, and I cut in and bang.
Well,
This was a
there's
huge
definitely
problem.
there's definitely abuses, but you know, like you can have an org, like I worked a lot with AOLA, and you know, they have regs making calls. They do have a Div 6, but they don't have the staff to go out. There's people that I worked with, I was in comm with for several years. They didn't live, you know, like one girl I remember up in Canada. Finally, after 3 or 4 years of talking to her on the phone regularly and working through her personal problems, whatever, she finally arrives at AOLA. And I got the FSM commission, and I earned it because I was the terminal that got her back on the bridge. So I understand what you're saying. I think
Well, the important thing, David, is what does LRH say? That's the important thing.
I've never seen exactly. I've read. I think we're going to have a little disagreement here.
Well,
But
I'll tell you,
I
I
know
can
those
send you the
FSM
original.
policies pretty cold because I lived them, and but I understand your.
Listen,
And you
I
know,
did an eval on this whole thing because I couldn't figure it out either. So I did a complete eval on this and wrote the whole thing up. And from 1994 on, I sent the same report up the lines to everybody every year. And they would call me in for sec checks, and then I would get a sec check. And then I would go to Qual and sit down with the cramming officer and go over with the cramming officer. Remember Mr. Worstel at the base, at the
no.
LA base?
Oh,
Worstel, he was a cramming officer for the very, very high line. I'm forgetting the term. But I asked him if he would give me my cram. And I said, okay. And the cram was on this eval because the eval came back down and I was being sec checked and crammed because of this eval. They clearly didn't read it. And so Worstel said, sure, Shreff, no problem. He did all my cramming. I was a world champion mission registrar and so forth and so on. I lived right there in LA. So any cramming I needed, I went to Mr. Worstel. And so he sat me down. His first order of business, he read the cram, he set up the cans and the meter and stuff. And then he read the evaluation, you know, my evaluation for which I was being crammed. And he was getting through this thing and he pulled out volume 6 and he looked at the policy and then back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And this is a half-hour passage while he's going through these materials. And then he closed the volumes and closed the report and closed the meter and said, Shreff, you found the arbitrary on the FSM program. We've been looking for this for ages. He went and set it up the lines. And 9 days later, he was on the RPF. I ran into him out in the street. I said, Mr. Worstel. And he says, sir, it's not Mr. these days. I said, what the hell? I can talk to you. He says, yes, sir, you can. And I can respond to you. And I said, may I ask? He says, no, sir, you may ask, but I cannot speak about this.
Yeah, he's probably running around in black and wearing a dirty rag on his arm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Painting or something. Yeah, but yeah, I went through the wars with that. And that's what brought me all the way up to going, who is doing this? Who is holding this out of place? Because everybody agrees it. I mean, they award the flag FSM of the year and there isn't anybody who doesn't agree that this is the way it's done. So it's the way it's done, but that's not what Ron says in the policy. That's not the way we did it in San Francisco. We very jealously guarded our selection lines. There were no public people that ever crossed our selections. And our staff was the best paid staff on planet Earth. People thought, what are you guys doing wrong? What are you guys doing? This is the policy we use. But we put a lot of people up the bridge, you know, many, many, many thousands of people onto their OT levels. But we started them. We created the whole machine to start people on the bridge and get them all the way up the line. Anyway, I appreciate it's a sore point, David, because you think, oh my God, I was doing, what have I done? Believe me, I've been through that for years. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to learn on this stuff, but it's all therapeutic at the end of the day when you find out that's why that happened and that's why that happened. It's like the discoveries of the OCA, any of these interesting
Well, while we're on the
discoveries.
subject of, that's all church business, really. I mean, dissemination is still going on, but it's, nobody's paying anybody FSM commissions in the field.
There's no structure anymore. Yeah.
No
true.
structure. So as a marketeer, a dissem person, promoter, a public relations person, what's your take currently? Like, looking at everything that's going on, is the church irredeemably dead? Can that be resuscitated? And how do you feel about the field and what the prospects are for the field?
I think the prospects have never been better for the field, particularly with what's going on Earth today. This planet never needed a dissemination drill more than it needs it today. People need DPTSing. They need to find out what is going on around here. This is so crazy. Yes, it's a wild world. And like Ron said, when the world wars hit, that's when religion takes a front row seat. And there's a huge demand for precisely the things that we have as Scientologists. And from a marketing point of view, like LRH told us many times, our best dissemination weapon is the tone scale. It's the emotional tone scale. Everybody enjoys it. And I'll tell you, for how many years that I toured the planet, I've talked to over 1 million people. We finally sat down and put a pen to paper, talked to over 1 million people about the emotional tone scale. And all those people going into local organizations and stuff. People are fascinated with it because it's such a real subject.
Yeah.
Science of Survival, an incredible book. But you keep it very simple and people go, gee, my wife and I are always bitching at each other. Well, if you're below this level on the tone scale, whatever is coming out of your mouth is going to end up badly. If you can't first get your ass up this emotional scale, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
Because people low on the scale don't hear well, they don't see well, they think you said something that you didn't say. The emotional tone scale is an incredibly interesting subject, and people need to find out more about it. It's the best dissemination tool we ever used.
Yeah, well, I agree. And one thing about, back when is we had a central organization to send people to. They have a realization, you could talk to them about the tone scale and they go, oh yeah, I want that. Where do I get it? And you could send them somewhere. Now we have this problem of, we got individual field practitioners, but we don't really have a place to send them. And so I didn't tell you about it, but I wrote up an eval that I'll send to you afterwards. But I think there's solutions to improving the field and getting people more access to Scientology. But, people are caught up in the trauma of having left the church and being abused by the church, and a lot of ex-SO. And that's another thing I want to ask you about. Like, I just did a podcast where I called it Flipping the Script, because for a number of years, when the media or anybody gets promoted to talk about Scientology, it's these ex-Sea Org members and people with a grudge, and they say Scientology this and Scientology that, and they don't differentiate between that church and the subject. So I'm trying to, and I know you would agree, but I'm trying to flip the script and say, hey, this is a fantastic subject. Yeah, the church is bad and they don't, but we're not dealing with that. Scientology, the subject, is a separate thing. What's your take?
I'll tell you one of my pet peeves on this, David. One of my big pet peeves.
That they don't differentiate?
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely the case. But this Ramini girl.
Yeah, don't get me going. Actress. Don't get me started.
Yeah, well, she started out. It was all about what's happening in the Church of Scientology. And then Rinder came along, hooked up with her, and said, let's take the right target, which is Scientology itself.
Right.
So she's no longer talking about the Church of Scientology. She's talking about Scientology. She never even mentions the Church of Scientology anymore. And that was wow. That was Rinder's contribution to this thing. I have my own opinion of this, but the truth of the matter is, it's not about the Church of Scientology. It's about the subject of Scientology, and you can't understand it unless you look at it for yourself and make up your own mind about it.
Yeah.
But as long as you got people going, oh, no, Scientology doesn't. Scientology doesn't do anything. It's a freaking subject. It's a library book. You see this? It's a book.
Yeah.
I've never heard of the person in the world. You can pick it up, you can read it, you can disagree with it, and put it down again. But boy, it's created so much stuff. It's like, no,
Yeah.
Scientology isn't creating that. It's a fantastic subject.
Well, we need spokespeople like you and me and others to get out there and, change this narrative because, the news media, they're lazy. So they'll go to, well, who can be a spokesman for Scientology? And they'll go, they'll either get the church spokesman, which is just going to give a line of crap, or they'll get an ex-executive who is going to also give them a line of crap. So it's incumbent on nobody. I mean, I have done some interviews. They have come to me a couple of times, but we just need to get people on the same page to put out this word and, flip, like I say, flip the script of that narrative that, it is benign, it's as harmless as could be, but they twist it, the Tony Ortegas of the world who are bent on destroying it all, and the Rinders, let's face it, he's bent on destroying it all. That's who we're up against. So be it.
My father was a big shot, nuclear physicist, and he's quite well known. And we were having a conversation one day. He and his partner, never mind. And I thought, well, what do you think is a problem with the world? And he said, as far as I'm concerned, son, the single greatest threat to the American national security is the Central Intelligence Agency. You get rid of those, buddy. These people are just a bunch of criminals. They are just a bunch of, and this is a man who knew. This is a man who was writing this. They were continually trying to recruit him. But he says, no, you're a bunch of clowns. You're just a bunch of clowns.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because I make the case where in 1950, Elrich comes along and writes this book about how to, help yourself or help another person learn more about themselves, understand the mind and life better. And at the same time, over here with the Central Intelligence Agency and other, what they now call a deep state, we're creating MK Ultra, mind control, population control, brainwashing, electroshock, doing all this. And they're getting all the money, the funding, and the good PR and the good press. I mean, while L. Ron Hubbard is being attacked and Scientology is being attacked. So it's so it's kind of the same thing now, where, the good guys, you can almost figure out who are the good guys by who is the media attacking today, it's that bad. But that's the story of Scientology. It got attacked because this other, entity or group or initiative doesn't like people getting better and getting healthier or learning more about themselves. So that's the simplicity.
Yeah. Well, you remember what Ron wrote about this, these two people who'd come into the Washington organization and they had been PDH'd, pain drug hypnosis.
Right.
And he was CSing in Washington at the time. These people came in, didn't know each other. They were, I think, a week or two apart. But LRH was supervising the case. And going through the folders, discovered there's very similar things going on here, which was this XK Ultra program in its early phases. This is 1963. When he wrote his letter to the president at the time, said, sir, you have a situation going on in your government. They're running some kind of a program. I didn't mention specifically the CIA, but 2 weeks later, the church in Washington and the one in Los Angeles were raided, and all the materials taken. This is by the FBI, because the FBI can operate in the United States. CIA cannot operate on domestic grounds. But all those materials were turned over to the CIA, and the remote viewing came in, and all these other CIA programs and so forth and so on. But that's when the infiltration of the church started. Now, this is my opinion. I don't have any documentation on that at all. But
you know who Merrill Veneer is?
Merrill Veneer rings a bell. I don't think I've ever.
He wrote the book Arrows in the Dark. He was actually working for the Guardian's office and did undercover work. And it's a fascinating tale. I just interviewed him recently. It's not up yet, but he has a lot of stories about, or information about, when the FBI came in and raided, and of course he was Guardian office staff at that time, and so there's a lot of intrigue surrounding Scientology. It's fascinating that why would this this church and L. Ron Hubbard generate so much intrigue, and skullduggery, but my conclusion at this point is that we're dealing with the living lightning, like he talks about. Nobody else really digs into the human condition the way L. Ron Hubbard did, and that's a threat to being exposed to the cabal or the agenda of controlling populations and controlling man. So
well, and he even pointed out who's actually running this planet. There are these 12 people running this planet, and these are the people we're up against here. They mean business, and sure enough, they moved in and took over the church, and with all their various programs. Now, I'm not at all in touch with anything in the church right now, David, but maybe you can tell me. I've heard.
Oop, your screen froze. I'm going to give it a second, but your screen froze and I'm not hearing you. If you're hearing me, let's just give it a second. Hopefully your computer will catch up. Oh.
Okay, so Shreff was cut off and not able to rejoin, and we actually picked it up a few days later, and that's going to be part 2, because we pick it up from that very interesting topic of the church takeover and who might be behind that, and also we go into the future. What's the future, and what ideas are there that we can how can we export this fabulous subject to the masses, to millions of people? So look for part 2 of the Shreffler interview. It should be a link below, either on the YouTube or the podcast platforms, and we'll see you and look forward to having you join us again soon. Thank you.